Guys, hope all of us are doing fine. My name is Ernest, and this is Ernest Sciences and Mathematics TV channel. In our discussion today, I'm going to look at the concept of Newton's second law of motion, and this is going to assist us just like the first law in trying to describe a motion of various objects and the effect of forces on this particular object. Now we're going to see that these particular laws of motion are going to play a fundamental role in trying to create a basis for the description of the elementary particles, which of course are going to be assuming that wave-particle duality nature, which we have looked at in some of the ways in our description of the concept of quantum mechanics. But in this case, we're going to rely on these specific laws in trying to describe the aspects of motion of objects. And from our previous discussion, I mentioned that Newton's first law, which we had described, of course, gave us an impression of a motion of an object, which is going to be either described in its state of rest or in its state of motion. And of course, we are going to see that in this specific two cases, for the concept of rest, we have decided that the object is going to possess a velocity component given in terms of one dimension as 0. And in this case, this is going to be assisting us try to describe this nature of the particular object under consideration. Now in this case, for an object under motion, we said that we consider the velocity of this specific object as the initial plus the final one, which is going to be giving us this specific aspect of a velocity given as that. So we as well described the concept of this specific acceleration. So in this case, from Newton's first law of motion, they say that if an object is in motion, then it's going to be continuing in its state of motion with a constant velocity. So in this case, we're going to expect the concept of acceleration being 0 at constant velocity. And this is going to be giving us basically an impression of Newton's first law of motion. Now we're going to look at Newton's second law of motion, try to contrast it with the first one. Now we're going to consider forces which are going to act on an object whereby its acceleration is 0, as in the first case for Newton's laws of motion. And therefore, in this case, we're going to see that these objects are going to be at equilibrium, whereby we're going to see that the forces are going to be in a state of a balanced form, as we are going to be describing this specific aspect for the first law, whereby we're going to have a constant, of course, a constant velocity given as that one, and the forces are going to be in equilibrium. Therefore, we're going to expect no acceleration as I've just mentioned in this particular case. And of course, we're going to see that there is going to be a net or unbalanced force in the second state of Newton's law of motion, which is going to, of course, depict the aspect of acceleration. So this is going to happen either whenever these components of speed and direction are going to change. And in this specific case, then therefore it's going to result in the unbalanced form of forces which are involved in trying to either move or change the position of this specific object. Now in some of our videos, we have looked at the way in which the concept of a circular motion can be described, whereby we talked about the concept of a centripetal force which is going to act upon an object moving in this specific orbit. And we had said that these forces are going to be described towards the center of so if there is somebody swinging this specific ball, the ball is going to experience a force due to this specific person, and of course the force is going to be acting an opposite force given in this specific case as F2. We're going to see that there is going to be an equilibrium for the two forces, but due to the change in the direction of motion of this specific object, then therefore the forces are going to be experiencing this aspect of imbalance, and therefore they are going to be described as unbalanced forces. Now in this specific case for Newton's second law of motion is going to pertain to behavior of objects which are of course exerting or all of the existing forces are not going to be balanced, and this in a way is going to give us a contrast from the first law which we have given. Now, the concept of acceleration, which I've mentioned due to the change of position of this object, is going to be depending on two specific variables. And of course, from my particular illustration on this specific case for circular motion, I've talked about the concept of the force involved. Now, therefore, this is going to be a force which I've referred to as the unbalanced forces which are going to be involved in causing motion of this specific object. And then we shall look at the mass of this specific object, which are going to assist us in trying to describe this specific object. And I've mentioned that in this particular case, whenever we're going to have a change in direction over this specific object or the variation in forces which are balanced, we're going to have an aspect of acceleration which is going to, of course, be taking part in this specific type of motion. And therefore that one is going to, sorry for that one, and therefore that one is going to assist us in trying to describe the Newtonian second law of motion, which is going to deal with the relationship between the force involved, the mass, and acceleration given as such. Now, from my experimental data which has been performed, there has been an ascertained relationship between this specific aspect of a force, mass, and acceleration of these particular objects, especially which involved these net or unbalanced forces which have mentioned in this particular case. So we shall give this specific relationship between the force involved, the mass, and acceleration, whereby the force is directly proportional, of course, whereby we're going to see that there's either going to be a direct or an inverse proportionality concerning the force and the mass. And of course, in this particular case, the object which is going to be in motion can be described in terms of its acceleration, whereby we are going to see that its acceleration is directly proportional to the force involved, which is an unbalanced force which I've mentioned. And of course, the acceleration is going to be inversely proportional to the mass of our object given as that one. So we're going to have a combined form of this specific description, whereby we're going to have the acceleration, of course, directly proportional to the force and inversely proportional to the mass given as that one. So in this case, this is, in a sense, is going to be giving us an algebraic representation of this relationship between acceleration, force, and mass. And of course, this is going to be resulting from a Newton's second law of motion. So we can have this specific formula giving us a variation of a force and acceleration given as a product of mass times acceleration given as that one. So in a sense, this is going to sum up the specific description for the Newton's second law of motion, which we are going to come across in our various discussions on the concept of mechanics. Now, in this case, we can look at this particular example, whereby we're going to have this development of this specific force given in terms of course, force is equivalent to, there's going to be an aspect of a proportionality constant given as that one, whereby we're going to see that in case we have a description for the various dimensions, or rather the various units of measurement for force. Now, in this case, we have said that this specific description can be given in terms of, so let's have this one, these two variables of force and mass, whereby we are going to have mass measured in kilograms, and then we're going to have acceleration given in terms of meters per square seconds given as such. So we can describe force by these specific dimensions, and of course find the elements of K which have introduced in this specific, of course, a formula for proportionality, or the constant which is going to be involved. And this constant is going to be depending on these specific units which have been used. So in case we have 1 kilogram of mass being described with this specific aspect of acceleration given in terms of 1 meter per square second, then we're going to have a unit of a force given in terms of what we refer to as a Newton. And therefore, that one, in a sense, can assist us try to describe the concept of a Newton. So in case the units used are going to be the standard, then therefore we're going to have this force given in terms of a Newton. So therefore, we can describe one aspect of a Newton given in terms of this specific formula, which is going to be given as such. So in case we come across a unit of measurement given as a Newton for force, then it's going to be describing this specific aspect of the various, of course, units which are given for kilograms and meters per second given as that. So we're going to come across various applications of this Newton's second law of motion, and it's going to be describing the motion of objects which are going to be experiencing this net force or the unbalanced force which I've just given, for example, for the circular motion which I've just given. And there are going to be, of course, an aspect of acceleration due to the change of speed and the direction given as such. Remember from our derivative, our derivation of the concept of acceleration, we had said that our velocity, we had said that we're going to have the change in direction or the change in displacement over time given as a concept of a velocity, and therefore the change in velocity against of course at time we said it's going to be giving us an aspect of acceleration. So in this case, if we're going to have a change of velocity, then therefore there's going to be an element of acceleration. And in the next case, for the concept of a circular motion, I've said that the change in direction of course is going to be having this aspect of unbalanced forces, which is going to result in of course the aspect of acceleration. So therefore, this is going to be forming a final discussion, but kindly check our description boxes for various links of other videos. Subscribe and engage us in the comment section, and also ring that notification bell for various updates on our discussions on the concept of Newtonian laws. So that is it for now, guys. Bye, God bless you. Catch us in our next video.